Alrighty, we are here with Shraysi Tandon, the founder and CEO of Kidsy, something super duper super close to home. Having a Kidsy in the house now. See what I did there? But Shraysi, absolutely love what you're doing with your business. So excited to dive into it today. But thank you so much for joining. This is actually the first interview recorded since we welcomed our daughter Jamie into the world. So welcome. Thanks for joining today.
And welcome, Jamie.
Thank you so much. She'll listen to this at some point. But before we get to Kidsy, I saw in your background that, in addition to all your time on TV and reporting from that standpoint, you also have a background in filmmaking and Invisible Hands, really, really powerful film that you put together and directed. What inspired you to dive into that topic in the first place?
Oh gosh, I am one of those people that when I get obsessed about a subject or uh, anything, I have to I'm compelled to go deeper. And with Invisible Hands, it was really through my work as a reporter and a journalist. I had coincidentally interviewed a Nobel Peace Prize winner whose name is Kailash Satyarthi. He famously shared his Nobel Peace Prize win with Malala Yousafzai of Pakistan. She got a ton of press. She's got a phenomenal PR machine behind her, and he sort of is less so aggressive in the PR world. But nonetheless, I thought the work that he did was really inspiring, which is he had rescued 80,000 children from child trafficking and child slavery and child labor, predominantly in India, where I'm originally from. I was born in India, but his work was all across South Asia. And as I was researching for my interview with him, I had one of those moments where I just kept getting goosebumps and chills all over my body. I was seeing some raw footage that he had put out into the world. I was sort of like tearing up. And I just could not wait for this interview to happen. We were doing it at the United Nations. And I've interviewed a lot of people in my life. Like, we would be on the floor picking up names if I were to just start rattling them out. But I was just so incredibly excited for this interview, like none other before. And I knew there was something there. Like, what was it that was driving this like wild excitement? And as I spent time with him after the interview wrapped and learning more, I just felt really compelled to do a longer piece, something that went beyond just 5 minutes. So those were like the early days of Invisible Hands brewing in my brain.
Invisible Hands brewing in my brain sounds like a sequel, so that's part two for you. But really,
You'll
really,
produce it.
I'm up for it. But really powerful topic, and you hear that a lot, just like in the, we'll call it the creative world in general, of like, that's how movies and films and books and podcasts and videos get made, is like when something really like grabs you by the heart and it's just like, hey,
Mm.
I'm speaking to you. Can you make something of me? So that's really inspiring. But from your more on the like behind the scenes there, what was involved for you going from like, this is a really compelling, something that's calling me, to actually going ahead and directing it?
Gosh, there's something to be said about the beauty of naivete. And sometimes the more ignorant you are and the less you know, I feel like the better prepared you are actually to go do it. Because had I known when I started making the film all the hoops and hurdles I would have to jump over and all the things that needed to happen in order for this to come to life, I probably would have stopped dead in my tracks and really taken a good hard look at my life. And then maybe have never made it. But I think the ignorance and the naivete, which I think is also very true for the startup world, but we can get to that later, is really what I think is like the magic potion that so many people need. And it was a lot of pieces coming together, building a team, raising money for the film, which at that point we hadn't even shot even, any any footage. And it was really sharing that vision and aligning people around and sort of rallying and getting a lot of permissions. And then we filmed in 6 countries around the world. And so at the peak of filmmaking, I was managing like 30 people across 5, 6 time zones, which was pretty wild. And so it was just a multitude of a million pieces coming together, but just knowing like which ones you had to do at what point in the game.
That's a phenomenal crash course for entrepreneurship, which crash course for entrepreneurship is a lot. I threw in four extra H's there. But by the way, you've mentioned the word, just impromptu, you've mentioned the word wild twice. So like you were born to be on this podcast. So thank you for
Yes.
that. Before we get to your inspiring business story, this is going to really, kill the mood, but I have to ask, like, what's one of the most just kind of shocking or unbelievable things that you learned about, child labor, child trafficking through that film?
Such a great question. No one's ever asked me that. Many shocking pieces throughout the course of like the 4 years I was doing it. I would say the biggest one is how complicit politicians and government agencies are in the allowing of the human rights abuses to take place. Because a lot of the times they are contending against really big, powerful corporations who have trafficked children and enslaved children working in their supply chains. You have to understand some of these companies, their market valuation is greater than even the GDP of the countries that they're operating inside. So there's tremendous power plays at work there. And it's the government agencies really turning a blind eye. So it goes back to a lot of the onus falling on the companies as opposed to the governments. But just looking at how intertwined and complicit that web was, I think was like the most shocking part for me.
So let's talk about a shockingly cool and good company. That was a wonderful segue. Thank you. Let's talk Kidsy. So obviously, like you've covered a wide range of topics in your background, and some scary and some hard to learn about. And then you also get to kind of this world now of baby products and baby toys, like such a happy, positive, inspiring world to be in. So let's talk all things Kidsy, which love the name, by the way. It's just super, like, bounces off the tongue. But
Thank you.
Kidsy, for anybody who's not familiar, I would say Kidsy is pretty different than any other baby toy or baby product company out there. Do you have like a one-liner of like what makes you different?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the one-liner that everybody would resonate with and know instantly is what we're building is the t.j.maxx of the baby and kids world. And it's actually a moniker that's been given to us by a really large media juggernaut, the Motherly. They actually called us that, and we've kind of been running with it because it's such a great way to sum up, reverse logistics, returns, liquidation, supply chain, and all of those pieces into like just one bite size. But it's a discount, open box, excess inventory platform.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal nickname, TJ Maxx. That it includes a lot in it as opposed to listing out all those long words, which I already forgot. But so really, really cool and unique company. How did you stumble into the like baby product space in the first place?
Yeah, so it actually goes back to my film. So when I was filming Invisible Hands, I would sign NDAs with some warehouses and farms and various, like whether it was agricultural companies or clothing companies and so on and so forth. And I would go and visit their factories and their warehouses and their farmlands all across the world, including the United States. And in one of the warehouses that I visited, we were there to sort of understand like the supply chain mechanisms and their labor force and workforce. And I had seen pallets and pallets of product that were at the side of the warehouse. It looked brand spanking new, collecting dust, and it had a huge label across of it that said destroy. And so it just caught my eye and I asked the manager, what is that? And he said, oh, those are our customer returns. And I said, okay, but it looks brand new. He goes, yeah, maybe some of them are. And so what does destroy mean? He said, well, it's going to the landfill. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, that's where most customer returns in this country go. And all of a sudden, we were not talking about child labor. We were now talking about returns and excess inventory. And I left that meeting like still having a film to shoot and edit, but could not stop thinking about this thing. that I had just seen. And I just started randomly searching and Googling, like, what is this returns crisis in the United States? Like, does inventory really go to landfill? And I've always known that like fashion is famous for wastage, and you hear about like designers burning clothes, so on and so forth, because that's a really sexy headline. Like people want to click onto like, a Ralph Lauren or a Zara or a Valentino potentially. Like, not saying that they do it, but that's a much more sexier headline to click into rather than reading about like washing machines and strollers getting burnt. Um, but it was one of those nuggets that never left me. And after filmmaking wrapped, I kind of went through the same journey again, like as a human, like that I went through with my film and, with that before that with my journalism career, where I couldn't stop thinking about this thing. And I was just fascinated. And like, and one of the things you get trained very early on to do as a journalist is to dig really deep, start investigating. You become very curious, investigative. You start interviewing, you start poking around. We're very nosy, curious people as humans. And again, like never did anything about it. It just always stayed in the back of my mind until I became pregnant with my daughter. And as you know from just recently having had Jamie, my daughter also starts with a J, Jaina. I was sort of pregnant with her. I was shopping for her. And I was like, holy moly, I need to acquire like 200 items for her in the first year of her life. And she's going to outgrow everything by year two. Let me think of a really smart way of doing this. And so I called one of the warehouses and I said, do you have any strollers that are customer returns that you're going to destroy or send to landfill? And they said, yes. And I said, well, I'd be interested in purchasing it from you. And they said, well, we can't sell you the one, but we'll sell you the 200. So those were the early days
Wow.
of Kidsy.
Well, shout out Jaina and Jamie, future BFFs, all of the J names. But what an amazing way to start a business. Like that's that like the roots of entrepreneurship is just like kind of going to like asking questions that nobody asks about, like what can I do something with that, and sure enough it worked out great that like, hey, you can do this in bulk. So
Yeah.
that's so what a way to start a business. What were the steps to bring it from like that initial bulk order to like creating a brand and turning this into a real company?
A lot of little steps, right? And I think
Baby
the
steps.
first thing was baby steps, right? Baby steps to hopefully a behemoth of a baby company. But the little steps were just trying to understand what was the supply side going to look like, and then what was the demand side going to look like, and then how could I bring those two together? Trying to understand, like, is the supply side really strong and healthy? Is the demand side really strong and healthy? How, can the scale? How big is the market? And then really starting off, I guess, to give someone who's listening more tangible advice is do what you dream of doing at like the billion, $2 billion, $3 billion scale, but shrink it down to what it would look like at just $100 scale. And how do you execute on that $100 vision? And so, can you take one open box, liquidated product, bring it in house, and sell it to a customer that's looking for it? And then now, can you do two of those, and three of those, and 10 of those? Now, what if you tried another category? Can you do two, three, four, five? And you try another category. And then you start kind of, that's like the very early days of, I mean, they call it the MVP, minimum viable product. And that's really what the MVP looks like. It's like, how do you think of like the biggest vision of this and just shrink it down into, you know, somewhat of like first principles?
My brain is ruined on MVP because the show Silicon Valley, I want to say it was the pilot, was called MVP, which is a clever name for like a startup show, pilot. But I always think of that show when somebody says MVP now, not even the like Kevin Durant meme. But so it's a great analogy there. Dream big, but shrink it down at the same time. Shout out, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But when you look at your business, as you were saying, similar to your, the documentary, like you're managing so many different parts. There's so many, people and relationships involved. How did you even start doing that for Kidsy? Like who was of all the people in the Kidsy sphere, who was most important to start establishing and building relationships with?
It would have to be the supply side, because unlike other consumer companies where you're actually, designing the product and then doing the R&D and then engineering it, manufacturing it, developing it, for us, it was in some ways very much like a marketplace, right? Where we don't create the inventory, but we source the inventory and then we connect the inventory to the customers. Kidsy, of course, holds the inventory. So in that sense, we operate like very much like a true blue consumer company where, we buy it and it's ours. But just ensuring like you have product. And the way I sort of, I guess, whittle it down is, if you think about if you're building an online store, nobody wants to walk into an empty store. And so how do you start like populating that store with products and also an experience that really resonates with people and adds value?
What incentive is there for like all these different retailers or manufacturers to offer something to you that is ultimately sold at a discounted price versus kind of going their more direct route?
Yeah, so a lot of retailers and brands actually do not restock customer returns and excess inventory. And the reason they don't do that is because the way their business model and their supply chains are built out is really for their full price products. And so when an item comes back, like so many times customers would go drop off an item, to be returned to Amazon or to Kohl's or to Walmart. And they just simply just drop it off in a mailbox or at a customer service queue without really thinking about all the different steps and the journey of that returned product. But it essentially hits about 6 or 7 touch points as it makes its way back into the store shelf. And every touch point is associated with a dollar amount. So by the time it's ready to be restocked, it's about 65 to 75% of the retail cost for any brand or retailer to restock the product. So just on a mathematical sense, it doesn't make sense for them to do it. That's number one. So it's just sort of like on a pure like cost to revenue basis, it's nonsensical. The second hand is that, or the second point is that it also is very cannibalistic to their full price business model. Here you are as a brand, as a consumer company that is constantly developing and putting out new products, new fashions, new lines, new styles. And you really just can't have a whole line of products that were last season or last year or a line that you're phasing out or customer returns that are open box or damaged box live side by side to your full price model. And so there has to be another path for it. And so traditionally, a lot of these products would often end up in the landfill, or they would be broken down for parts and recycled, or they would be put in incinerators and they would generate electricity out of the incinerated product. And then other times they would be shipped and sold internationally. But the sort of the pathway for most of it was landfill. And so now what we're doing is we're rerouting it and giving it a second life. And 80% of everything we sell is actually brand new.
Yeah. So my wife Dana is the one who introduced me to Kidsy, and it was perfect because way back when Jamie was 2 months old. Now she's 3.5 months old. We went to Florida for a month and spent the month with all the grandparents, a lot on Dana's parents' side, and then we went over and saw my parents, and it was the best time, and it was just amazing to be down there with our new daughter, but their new granddaughter, and but as part of it, what we realized is like, oh my God, the grandparents are going to need to order like so much baby supplies and toys and stuff to make it not quite baby proof, but baby livable, I guess, especially newborn livable. And Dana pointed out that like they found this website Kidsy where you can get like like a bassinet, for example. We got on both sides, and it was, I don't know, $100 or $200 less than if you were just to do everything at face value at a different provider. And it was either brand new or like it was on a like a showroom floor and had never been
Hmm.
used before. And like, this is just absolutely brilliant. So we were so happy with the quality, so happy with the price. It was perfect for that. And obviously so many use cases as well. But word of mouth is obviously huge, but overall, like, marketing is such an important part, but also challenging part for so many brands out there. First off, where did the name Kidsy come from?
It is such a boring story and so
All right, skip.
uninspiring, I feel
No, no, I'm
like.
just kidding. I want to hear. No.
No, I can tell you. So I was thinking about a name for a while, and I had a couple of names that kept coming to me. But the way Kidsy made it on the short list and on the running is I was thinking about a name, and I kept coming back to like for some reason, K and K and kids. And I was like, how do I incorporate this as to kids? Because I don't want it to be baby and I don't want it to be children or toddler. Like, I don't want it to define it by any age. I just wanted it to be like all encompassing kids. And children sounded too stuffy and too, like, very old school English. And I was like watching something on YouTube, I think, a podcast or something, and I saw an ad for Etsy. I said, "Oh, Etsy, that's cute. I love how short it is, how it's like two syllables and it has like the C at the end and the SY at the end." And I was like, well, what if it's like Kidsy? Like Etsy, but Kidsy. That's how we got stuck with the name. And I then ran a survey monkey. So I put like the four names that were in the running. Don't even ask me what the other ones were. They were all like just not that great. And I
We're gonna
and
need
I
to
sent
find
it.
that list.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure one of my friends has it. And I like sent it to like 50 friends, cousins, family members, people that were either, had children or were about to become parents. And I let everybody vote. And Kidsy was uh, by far like the top pick.
Yeah, it's perfect. What is for like from the marketing standpoint, it's so difficult just to do marketing in general, but also you're selling products that are not only competing with so many baby providers out there, but you're in a really unique situation where you're like sometimes it's the same exact product. Like how do you what's been like the main approach from a marketing standpoint of developing Kidsy as a brand and actually like getting at so people actually pay attention, like, hey, this we're open for business, this is a place where you can buy really good stuff at a great price.
Yeah, I think so much of it in the early days. Like Kidsy's not even 2 years old. It's our 2 year anniversary in September of this year, September 2025. So we've come a really long way and grown really aggressively in such a short amount of time. And I think the number one thing is like when you are launching a new company or a new brand into the world, is like, how do you build trust? And you really do it by making sure that every single customer experience is as flawless and seamless as possible. And then you try to build trust signals and trust cues along the way. So whether it's like day one signing up to a review platform, because in the early days you may only have like 10, 20, 30, 40, but after some time, like those reviews add up. And then actually sending product as well to some micro influencers in the space who perhaps maybe you don't know what their shopping habits are necessarily, or but they have a decent sized audience, and to be able to put product in their hand and say, hey, this is what open box is, and this is how many pounds of like product you save from the landfill when you shop on Kidsy. So the whole mission around Kidsy is actually, we're not just a discount platform. Like, of course, like cost savings is a huge reason why people come to Kidsy, but also we're extremely sustainable and environmentally friendly. And so many shoppers today want to shop from brands that have sustainability at their heart of their mission. If I had a choice between putting my dollars towards a brand who I knew had a very clear sustainability mission and was, low carbon footprint and environmentally friendly, I would opt to spend my money there. If even if I had to spend an extra like couple of bucks, I would put it there rather than if I knew that something was perhaps a little less unsustainable. But the beauty is that oftentimes discount has long been associated with just being terrible for the environment. And I think a lot of that has been propelled by the rise of fast fashion, and sort of the consumption of fast fashion, the use and throw model that we see. And so I think it's such a joy to be able to like have the word discount and sustainability under the same umbrella.
Yeah, it's this perfect umbrella. Rihanna would be proud, but the
Hmm.
fact that I hadn't thought about that till you said it. Like that is gold. That you are doing so much good for the environment, and I've heard the term like re-commerce and
Mm,
recycling. You're doing all that good that you're right. Typically, people are like, oh, I would even pay a little bit more for that, and yet you're still able to provide those prices that are so important, especially for new parents who are adding so many new costs to their life. Not to blame the kids, but adding so many new costs
yeah.
to their lives. So it's a really, really unique angle you have there, and you hinted that like skyrocketing growth have you had so far, and congrats
Mm,
on that. Like that's super
thank you.
impressive and inspiring. I've used the word inspiring a lot. It must be inspiring, but if you had to point to like one thing besides the trust you've built, what's something that you've done that has like really worked well for the business that maybe some other business owners out there can replicate in some form for their growth?
I would say it just boils down to one thing. Just make sure that and it sounds really cliche, but just make sure that what you're putting out into the world is actually of really great value. Um, because that's the only thing that's really going to resonate. If you're not providing tremendous value, whether it's to your supply side or your brand partners or to your retail partners or to the customers, it's really, really difficult to continue growing and scaling because the value that people receive and people feel and people get, they'll suck the product right out of your hands and right out of your platform. Uh, and even in the early days when we had a really like shitty MVP, am I allowed to
Yeah, no,
say
yeah, we're explicit, so you can
we're
even say the word
explicit? Okay.
MVP.
So what we had is really shitty MVP. We're like really clunky that people had to jump through all these hoops and hurdles in order to get through the checkout. And the checkout was like this really ugly page. I remember in the early days, it didn't matter because the product that we were offering and the price it was coming at and the feel good nature of the purchase that was driven by the sustainability, like all of that was such an exciting experience for the customer that they were happy to use this like clunky website in the early days just to yank the product out of our hands.
Oh,
And I think that's like the early signal of like people talk about like, well, what is product market fit? What is, well, I think it's less about what it is and what it's more about what it feels like. And that's what it feels like is when you can't list products fast enough because every time you're listing something, it's just selling. And you realize like the customer or the UX experience isn't even that hot, and yet it's still working. So I think, to answer your question, like value, like what's the value add?
well, I sincerely hope you find this next segment valuable because I've poured my heart into. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna switch it up a bit because as you know, I love on this show to you know showcase the a genuine picture of the founder as a person as well, so both inside and out of the business. And so we're gonna get to the unusual, which is a pretty usual no, it's all over the place, but basically this is about showing more of your personality, who you are as a person. It doesn't have to tie to the business at all. But first thing, quirks. What's something a little quirky about your personality that maybe your family, team, somebody calls you out for, but it's just who you are?
Oh my gosh, so many things.
You can have a we'll find the list of quirks and we'll put it up with the list of names that didn't get chosen for Kidsy.
Gosh, I know there. That's a great one. I feel like I'm the butt of all jokes in my family.
Oh,
Well, it's funny. My family used to always tease me that they thought if I wasn't a journalist, I should have become like part of the CIA or FBI. I always like the investigative work, and if I meet someone or if I encounter something or if it's a topic or a person or a place, for some reason, like I don't know what it is about my personality, but I would just like investigate the heck out of it. And so. I think I also would get teased a lot, like, here's Miss FBI, like, with her report, and here's a
Did you have an
breakdown of
official
everything.
badge that you showed up for people?
I really should have made one for myself or something. But yeah, and I guess if the journalism thing never worked out, maybe that's a career path I should have, I could have looked at. Um, yeah.
All right. How about pet peeves? What's something that just like slightly annoys you a little bit, but in the grand scheme of life, it's like not important?
Oh, okay. That's because when you say pet peeves, I often think of like the usuals, which to me feels really important. Like, I have no tolerance for people who are rude and no
Oh,
tolerance for
I
people who
love
are
rude
lazy.
people. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Laziness, I think, is another one of my pet peeves. But okay, that's consequential, I feel. Rude and lazy is consequential. Okay, I have a good one. Toilet paper? Uh, it's this magical device that I will send you. Open box.
Please, as long as it's recycled. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
It's going to
That
be
would not
open
be good.
box, customer returned, may or may not be gently used.
As long as it's gentle, that's all we're asking for.
So toilet paper. I have this thing where the toilet paper has to go over the roll,
Oh, me
and
too. Me
so you have to
too.
pull from over, not under.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And so I would go into like people's house, even like people's houses I don't know, and if the toilet paper was the other way around, where you pulled from under, I would fix the toilet paper rolls. Yeah.
I'm not saying I've done that before, but I'm not saying I have not done that before. I'm totally on the same page as same side of the roll as you. And if anybody is a fan of the under, which it is pretty common to do the under way as well, you know who you are. There are like images online for how toilet paper was designed on a roll, and it does come over the top. Granted, now I mean there's probably like AI images for the other way too, so who knows? But that is a great one.
I feel like when they do the personality test, there should be a personality test for how do you like your toilet paper?
Yeah, exactly. Pull down or pull up. All right, and then what is a weird talent that I call them weird talents, but maybe it's like a party trick, like something just like you're really good at, but really it's not a big deal.
I am really good at making babies and children stop crying.
Ooh,
That's a
can you
good
come
one.
babysit?
Yeah. It's just like this
What are your tricks?
it depends. Like, I often like feel out the child in front of me. I also do open heart meditation on the side, and so there's a way that you can
Mm.
tap into like this feeling and this energy that you get without making it sound like too much woo woo. But I'm really good at making children stop crying and consoling them. And so when a kid goes from like 0 to 100, I can bring them back down to zero pretty quickly. I'm also very good at packing. So I can pack for an entire trip. It doesn't matter if it's a weekend, a week, or a month, in like 10, 12 minutes, done.
Wow. Um, can you come babysit and also come help pack, please?
Pack, yes.
Those are huge skills to have. That's awesome. Is there anything like not even considering like the meditation side of things, but like for anybody who not of that I'm in this bucket, but if anybody's a new parent and a baby is crying pretty ferociously, inconsolably, is there anything that you found like works like really quickly?
I often think the if it's an infant, change of scenery. So many times I see kind of people consoling exactly where they are in the same room, same space, same. I often like one quick hack is like just get up and move and change the location. That's number one. Of course, there's like so many other things like, are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they sleepy? Do they need to burp? Is the diaper dirty? But like just the one quick thing that is like change the scenery. And I think for the toddler, if it is a meltdown, like again, it's six, seven different things you can quickly try. But the one quick thing is oftentimes just validating that feeling and telling them that it's okay to cry and actually being in full agreement with them like, yes, this thing is terrible, and yes, this is awful that you don't get that second piece of chocolate. And so just kind of meeting them where they are and allowing them to have that full explosive emotion oftentimes will bring them back to base.
Oh, that's super helpful. And people say like you need to you need to rock them, you need to keep them moving, and we've seen that with Jamie. Like if she's a little fussy or a lot fussy, going out for a walk or carrying her to around the room, or I guess a different room. That's exactly what you're saying. Change the scenery. So that's really, really appreciate the advice there. And as if you haven't provided enough, we're gonna wrap up with another with another segment, rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right. This is it.
I'm nervous,
This is even
but I'm
more all
ready.
over the place. Let's get wild.
Okay.
Your background as a TV reporter. I'm always fascinated about being on TV. Well, in general, it's pretty cool. But two, being on camera, like TV cameras or like all the lights and everything. To me, it's still so different than even if you have like a great video production setup for your podcast, for example. Like, what's a tip you can share for getting more comfortable on camera?
The best tip I ever got was actually one of my news directors. Shout out to Bob Crawford at CGTN.
Shout out
Bob
Bob.
is, yeah, is someone I care about and adore deeply and still find myself very close to him. Bob was a phenomenal leader, and one of the things he always said was in a very high stakes breaking news environments, it didn't matter at that point, I had done it for years, but sometimes when the story feels really big and it's breaking news on live television and maybe you don't have all the information, I mean, you have to understand that when you are in front of a camera broadcasting to millions of people around the world on a certain topic, I mean, it's if you get anything wrong, the stakes are really high. There's potential like legal implications, there's cancel culture at play, and so it can feel extremely overwhelming, especially given how sensitive the topic is. And I was a business journalist and covering business, finance, economics. So I think for us and the political reporters as well, it became very high stakes. Bob used to always say, look at the camera and just look and pretend that the lens of the camera is either your parent or your friend and you're conveying the story to them. And so in those moments when it would feel very intense, I could hear his voice in my head and I would just pretend that the lens was not an audience of like 5, 6, 7 million, but just a friend.
Yeah, that's really sweet advice, and it's slightly different from like the old advice of imagine your audience in their underwear. That would not work well if you're
Yeah.
imagining your friends and family in their
No.
underwear. So glad that's a slight twist on that one. We'll skip that.
Yeah.
Uh, Speaking of that part of your career, so you actually, as you hinted at earlier, interviewed some of the most incredible people in the world. I mean, everyone from like world leaders to Matt Damon, basically a world leader in New England. What who's somebody that like you came away from the interview and were just like absolutely blown away by?
Well, Kailash Satyarthi, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who I ended up making a film with and film on. But I think other really more impressive people for me were Al Gore, Vice President Gore. I remember when we were filming our interview together, firstly, he was extremely warm and gracious and just so sweet and kind and so generous with his time and his answers because there is periods of time that you spend before you start filming and then once the story wraps you're also together, spending time wherever you are. And I remember very clearly, like all we were doing all the lighting for the interview at the time, and one of the light bulbs that our someone on our lighting crew was setting up, the light bulb burst and exploded right before we started filming. So we had the sound team, the camera team, the lighting team, and the light bulb exploded. And his Secret Service, everybody in the room jumped. And Secret Service was there, and they were very quick to sort of turn to the light that was because, I mean, there's been horror stories in the past where people have used cameras
Mm.
and equipment in interviews as weapons, right? But Al Gore was completely unflinched and just ended up like cracking jokes about it. And so I would say like that was always very memorable to me. Another one was the Israeli president, Shimon Peres. Here is an extremely powerful leader, I remember interviewing him at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and he was just, again, like the warmest person. There was his entire entourage and detail was all around us. And after the interview wrapped, I just started sharing with him how some of my closest friends are actually Jewish, and some of my best friends were Jewish. And I was telling him about all the Israeli food that I love, and I was very particular about sharing like details with him. And he was just so, I don't know, enamored by like this Indian woman talking about challah and all this. And so he says, well, why don't you join me for Shabbos dinner or Shabbat
Yeah.
dinner on Friday and be my guest to Shabbat dinner? And I was like, this is such a surreal, like out of body experience. And fast forward 48 hours later, I was at Shabbat dinner with
Oh my God.
the president of Israel, and then at that time, the prime minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, was also hosting and doing the prayer to bless the food, and it was one of those out of body experiences. Yeah,
Wow. Those are absolutely incredible stories.
yeah.
Dana's going to be embarrassed, but she actually hates how I say the word challah. I still don't. I can't get the ch right, or if you just say the h right through. But anyway, it's delicious. But oh my God, that part of your career, as if you're not seeing interesting people now. That part of your career exposed you to so many fascinating people in the world, and
But I will tell you one thing that I noticed throughout that career, which is there was always the same thing that happened again and again and again, which is it didn't matter how powerful the person I was who I was interviewing, didn't matter how famous they were, didn't matter how rich they were, how whatever, like all the superlative status, like adjectives that are often associated with these people. At the end of every single interview, all of them would turn to me and ask me, was I good? Was
no
that
way.
good? Did you get what you needed? How did I look? How did I sound? And it showed me that at the end of the day, just how human and how vulnerable people are. And it doesn't matter how many cameras you've spoken to or how many interviews you've done. Everybody's looking for some sense of like validation. Like, was that okay?
That's incredibly refreshing and humanizing. Hard switch. Basketball. You played basketball. Lots of basketball. What is your what? Who was like your basketball idol that you say you modeled your game after?
It was never that deep, honestly. Like I enjoyed watching the Chicago Bulls, I enjoyed watching the Lakers, but I was never one of those people that actually like looked and watched at a game. Jordan obviously like is one of my favorite athletes of all time, and absolutely like just enamored by him, both like on and off the court. I think he's such a fascinating personality. But for me, it was mostly just being a part of it, like a sport that I really loved. And I had lived in South Africa for a few years, and so in South Africa, I was on the basketball team and on the netball team as well, which is again a completely different sport, but similar but different. So it was never modeling it after anybody else, but just really just going up there and just doing your best and showing up and like trying to be as good as everybody else on the team, and trying to just be better than you were at the last practice or the last game. And what I love about like sports in general and being on a team sport is so much of it is about it's focusing on your own growth as a player, but then also making sure that like every time you're playing, like how are you supporting the full team and how are you bringing the team to win? And a lot of what I learned in my time, like playing basketball, which at the time I had no idea I was even learning and absorbing, has helped me so much today as an entrepreneur, as a founder. Like all of these micro lessons and nuggets that were passed down to me on and off the court by team members, coaches, other players. They're ringing like loud bells in my head now as I like, build a team and build a business.
Well, I knew you were a basketball legend. I didn't know you were a netball legend as well. I'm not as familiar with that. What's like the biggest difference between netball and basketball?
The biggest one is with basketball. When you have the ball in your hand, you dribble and you move with the
Oh,
ball. With netball is when you have the ball in your hand, you're not allowed to travel with the ball.
okay.
Yeah.
It's
And when you
almost.
catch the ball, you have to not, your feet can't be touching the ground when you catch it, and you can't travel with it. So you can pivot certain directions and then pass it. And once the next person, like you just keep passing it in order to move it down to the goal.
So you get really good at passing.
Passing, shooting, yeah, throwing,
Yeah. All
yeah.
right. Last one. You hinted at it with South Africa and India, but you grew up and have lived in many different countries and cities around the world.
Mm.
What what is the best thing you can do to, I guess, as they say, survive and thrive in like a completely new or foreign environment?
I think it depends for different people. For me, I always look at it as nothing is permanent. And I always look at it again, like my mentality is like it's not that deep. So it feels really big and it feels really, and yeah, granted, like moving is big, right? It is like uprooting your life and moving. But I also feel like everything that's done can also be undone. So if you don't like it, if you feel like this was not a good move or this was not a good decision, there are ways in which you can sort of unravel it and get out of it. So that's number one. Like that's been my attitude towards everything. Like it's just a chapter, and if you don't like the chapter, like change the chapter. Um, eh,
No,
but having
nobody ever says that. Nobody ever says change the chapter. It's always like, oh, on to the next chapter. That's exactly right.
Yeah, you can change, right? Like, and change is the only thing that's constant. And I think it's just as big as you make it out to be in in your mind. For me, I just look at it as an adventure. And that being said, I think it really comes down to your personality. So for me as a person, like I enjoy moving. I enjoy the challenge of like being in a different space or a different place. And I think I've done it like my whole life. So if I were to, I'm based in Chicago today, but if tomorrow I had to like uproot and move to like, I don't know, I'm just San Francisco or New York or wherever, London, like
Evanston.
it would,
No, I'm just kidding.
yeah, or Columbus, Ohio, like it doesn't matter. Like I could do it, you know? If I don't like it, I can just undo it.
Exactly. And shout out Ohio. I'm from Ohio originally, so
Oh, really?
we've
Oh,
come full circle. We've come home here. So, well, Cleveland, not Columbus, but close.
close.
Shraysi, thank you so much. This has been absolutely unbelievable. Just love everything you're doing with Kidsy and beyond, and your stories and insights. So thank you so much for joining and for all you do. I know if anybody wants to try out or buy anything on Kidsy, it's kidsy dot. Well, so do you say kidsy.co or kidsy.co? Because I never know.
Both, kidsy.co. And the reason why we don't have the com is because there is a squatter in Hong Kong that's asking for $500,000 for the .com.
Oh my
No
God.
joke. Yep,
Wow. I don't blame you at all. And that person's holding out.
kidsy.co.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So that's the website, kidsy.co. And then where's the best place if anybody wants to connect with you or learn more about you online?
Yeah, the best place to reach me is LinkedIn. That's probably the only platform I'm most active on. And if you want to, shop on Kidsy or just even browse or follow us, you can sign up and subscribe to our email newsletters. You'll get about three a week. And on Instagram as well, it's at Shop Kidsy.
Perfect. And thank you again. And final thoughts. Stage is yours. It could be a quote, just kind of one line, word to live by, whatever you want. This is just, send us home here.
My favorite motto and mantra is everything you want is on the other side of fear.
Bring on the bongos.